House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's push to get health care through Congress raising eyebrows among members of her own party. Here to discuss that and more, medical doctor, former Vermont governor, but probably most important is just CNBC contributor is probably the thing you put on your card now, isn't it, Governor?
Joe, that's exactly right.
That's what we like to hear. I was also chairman of the Democratic National Committee, and Judge Gregg is still with us. And I do get a little teary when I see you two together because it's nice that you agree. It's a lousy bill. This is a nice bipartisan meeting we have today, Governor Dean. Neither one of you guys like this bill. What do you think?
Well, that's true. And I don't agree with Judd about much, but I'll tell you one thing. He's a good Yankee conservative. I put my money in his bank any time that he was running a bank.
Yeah, you're not going to lose anything there. You're going to get like...
No, he ought to be running some of these banks on Wall Street that are going nuts again.
Yeah, you're going to get negative interest rates like we had for a little while, but...
that's just because he's so cheap, but isn't that what you want, the banker?
Yeah, a little deflation. Governor, do you think that, and you know, we're being a little bit cute there because you disagree with different things about the bill,
right.
Obviously, but do you think that there is a problem here with keeping a closed door?
No. Look, that happens one way or the other. I mean, that was bound to happen. I think those are the kinds of things that people cluck about in Washington. I think what the final work product is what really matters. The reason I'm not crazy about the bill is I think insurance companies continue to get to be able to charge lots of money. They can charge twice as much, or even in the Senate bill 2 or 3 times as much for older people as they do for younger people. And the problem is that's not really health insurance. And so I think there should have been a public option. But, okay, there's not going to be a public option. Let's make the best of this that we can. But there's a lot of stuff in here to be fixed. And one thing I think I agree with Judd about is it's probably too expensive.
Well, yeah, and Howard, we were both governor at the same time. I mean, isn't it just inappropriate for the Congress to pass an expansion of Medicaid up to 150 or 133% of income levels and then basically send the bill to the states? I mean, how would you as a governor or I as a governor deal with something like that? We don't have the elasticity in our state, and in your state I suspect also, unless the only way we have it in our state is people from Vermont come to New Hampshire and buy liquor. Then we get more elasticity. But as a very practical matter, we don't have a lot of elasticity in our budgets, and then suddenly you get this bill from the federal government that says you're going to have to pay another, in New Hampshire's case, almost $200 million.
Was actually one of the reasons I thought what Ben Nelson did was a good idea. We expanded, when I was governor, we expanded Medicaid to 300% for kids, and as a result, for the last 15 years, we've had universal health care for everybody under 18 years old in my state. So I think Medicaid is a good program. It needs to have its reimbursements increased for primary care people. The problem is, where I agree with you, is the financing. You can't finance this out of the states right now. I think they ought to expand the what do they call it, the Cornhusker or something or other, or whatever they call it down there. But the deal that Ben Nelson got, I think that could be expanded to all the states. It'd be expensive, but it'd be worth it. It'd be worth it.
You think that was a good idea? There are a lot of people who think, wait a second, he was just holding them up for ransom. He got a deal.
Yeah, but if you spread that to the other states, look, I've got 15 years experience in this. It works really well and it covers people.
How do you pay for it, Howard? I mean, as a very practical matter, the federal government also doesn't have the dollars to pay for that. What they're doing is cutting Medicare or reducing Medicare expenditures by $500 billion over 10 years, $1 trillion over the first 10 years it's in place, and $3 trillion over the next 20 years. And they're taking those funds and they're creating this new entitlement, which basically funds the expansion of Medicaid. Well, that doesn't seem fair to folks who are getting Medicare, who are already in a system which is headed towards insolvency. Shouldn't we if we're going to make those changes in Medicare, and I probably would support many of them, shouldn't those dollars go to basically making Medicare a more solvent program rather than creating a new entitlement or an expansion of Medicaid, which we can't afford?
No, I see. First of all, as you pointed out, you would support most of those changes because they mostly come out of durable equipment makers who were really as a collective group, not as individuals.
Medicare Advantage is the primary one.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of problems.
The ability of Medicare Advantage, except in the 3 lower counties of Florida, which were exempted out by the senator from Florida.
Yes, well, we know how the Senate works, and I don't blame you for getting out. In fact, I think it is a good. We're never going to rationalize this system and make any sense out of it unless everybody's in it. That's just a fact. That's why I believe everybody in America ought to have a health care system, and that's, in fact, the case in most of the industrialized democracies in the world. So I don't shy away from wanting universal health care. We can have a big discussion about how to pay for it, but I think we have to agree we have to do it.
I'm glad Howard used the term rationalize, because that's really a derivative of rationing. which is what you end up with when you go to a nationalized
We have
system.
rationing right now. 34 million people don't have health care.
Hey, Governor, I want you to put it wasn't so long ago you were chairman of the DNC. I saw an article yesterday that said it'd be bad for Democrats if something doesn't get passed, but it's not necessarily, you're not going to get a lot of points if something like this bill does get through. I mean, is it worth it? If you were chairman of the DNC, would you say, wow, I don't know if we've really done this the right way to try and, maintain control of both houses in November?
Well, I think if I were chairman of the DNC, I certainly wouldn't, because I would be obligated to defend my party right or wrong, which is what I did for 4 years. But I'm not chairman of the DNC anymore. If it were up to me, I think we ought to get a bill. I don't like this bill very much. I think it falls short. It's a big disappointment. But I think a bill, for the country's sake, we're not talking politically here, is better than no bill. And there's some things that we're going to work very hard in the next 3 weeks to try to make a difference in some of these deals that insurance companies have gotten,
Howard,
and all that kind of stuff.
How can you justify, you say you're going to work very hard for the next 3 weeks. Nobody's going to see it. I mean, you're going to work very hard in a closed room somewhere in the Capitol or maybe down at the White House. There are going to be 5 or 6 people in that room, and they're going to make all these decisions, and it's going to affect everybody's life in America. There will have been no transparency, no committee hearings, no chance to amend it on the floor. This bill was brought onto the Senate floor on a Sunday. It was voted the next Wednesday, Christmas Eve. No amendments were allowed. I mean, that's not the way the democratic process is supposed to work.
Wait a minute. That is the kind of stuff the minority party, and my party who did this when we were in the minority, always brings up, and the American people, what the American people want is a really fair, decent bill. You guys used reconciliation to pass the president's tax cuts, and then you screamed and yelled because we were going to use it to pass health care. Look, the process stuff I'm not sympathetic towards. I really am not.
I would have to disagree that something this big has ever been handled in this manner.
Governor, I realize you two are not going to agree on this point, but let me ask you while we have you here. You started out at the very beginning of this conversation saying something about Wall Street banks going wild again. You referring to the compensation deals that are out there?
Well, the compensation is bad optics, and the shareholders theoretically have some influence on that, but in fact they really don't. Here's what bothers me about Wall Street. Look, I come from a Wall Street family, 4 generations. I was always taught that the reason for Wall Street was to allocate capital. I see venture capital firms, cutting back on their investments in places like biotechnology, which is the cutting-edge industry of our country. I see Wall Street firms investing in things that don't produce any wealth except for themselves, like collateralized debt obligations and credit default swaps. I see Congress refusing to regulate the derivative market, except to have people report it afterwards. Where the hell is the Wall Street that my family grew up with for 4 generations, where capital allocation was what really mattered and speculation wasn't what really mattered?
Well, Howard, how do you expect people to put dollars which are fungible and liquid into investments where you're going to have the government coming in and setting the rate of return, if
the government doesn't set the rate of return?
Well, under this bill, you're clearly going to limit innovation because there's significant tax burden on
that is simply not so.
On the device.
As a matter of fact, since I do some work for the biotechnology industry, I'll just tell you there's some very good things in this bill for the biotechnology industry. That's the most innovative and important industry for the future of our country. It's the only place where we have a 10-to-1 lead over the next country.
You cannot defend on the basic element of common sense that when the government comes in and starts to manage a part of our economy, the people are going to invest and take risk in that part of the economy because they know their rate of return is going to be affected by a government decision made by people who are essentially out of the mainstream of the concept that profit makes sense. In fact, they don't like profit and don't believe that there should be adequate capital return.
The last time I looked, the defense contractors were doing just fine, and their business is mostly the government. This idea that big government is always bad, I think, is wrong. Does government manage some things as well as worse than in the private sector? Yes. Do they manage some things better? Yes, they do.
This is why we have a problem between Vermont and New Hampshire.
I'm seeing exactly.
Our maple syrup is better than yours.
Oh, my goodness. But our skiing's better than yours.
Mortally wounded.
All right. Thanks, Governor Dane. We appreciate it. And you were governor at the same time?
We were. We used to have ski races.
The judge was actually very good to me.
Great time.
All right.
We did.
Thank you. Hope to see you again soon, Governor Dean.
Thanks very much.
We have our...